Hi, everyone. So, this is the palace we're going to visit today. And this is the palace I showed you last week, but for a very different tour. It was a tour of the communal apartments in St. Petersburg. The thing is that this palace is now part of the big group of the history museums of the museums of history of St. Petersburg. And in winter, in January 2022, we went to this museum for two-part Hago tours on the history of the siege of Leningrad. So this museum has different exhibitions within itself, very different subjects. So the siege of Leningrad, World War II, that's where I did the two parts, like almost 3 hours we spent in the museum with the guide, and I was translating and we asked questions. We saw the artifacts from the Second World War times. It was incredible, very difficult tour, very emotional. And no, that was not in January. That was actually shortly after February 24. Yeah, that was already amidst the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Yeah, that's why it was also so emotionally difficult to run that tour. Then we also show the exhibition of the communal apartments. That's because in this palace, in the Soviet times, they part of this palace was turned into the communal apartments, but not the gala rooms. Don't worry, that's the rooms we are going to start looking at today. I don't think it's going to take us more than two tours, but let's see. It's not really my goal to make tours longer. No, it's just about the stories I want to share with you. But first of all, where we are and why it is named the Rumyantsev Palace, but not the Romanovs Palace. So, sorry, it's just a beautiful picture. That's the picture from Wikipedia, by the way. It's not even my picture. This is the English embankment of St. Petersburg. It's quite a long embankment between the two bridges, basically. And well, you won't see exactly this palace here, but it's in the line. It's one of the embankments along the Neva River. And as you can see, the buildings here are quite similar. And you see there is no spaces between the buildings. That's exactly what the decree was, what the law was. All the constructions along the embankments were supposed to be in one single line with no gaps in between the buildings. And you can see the area, the St. Agnes Cathedral. It's the downtown. It's the so-called Golden Triangle of St. Petersburg, and a little bit over there, there will be already the Winter Palace, the Hermitage Museum. So it's a very prestigious area, very upscale neighborhood, and it's called English Embankment because ever since the end of the 18th century and throughout the 19th century. Actually, throughout the revolution, basically, this is where a lot of English merchants, English businessmen, English politicians used to settle down. And also at some point in the English embankment even used to be the British embassy, and hence the name, English embankment. By the way, that's our palace. You can see it on the postcards from I'm not sure which year exactly, but that should be somewhat early 1900s. There's another postcard. And as you can see, the entire embankment is like a big pier. There are always ships here. We always pass by the English embankment on our boat trips, especially the one I'll be taking you on tonight in 90 minutes from now, actually, almost. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's going to be, I would say, just a nice opportunity to say hi to Count Rumyantsev when we sail past the embankment. And the this area originally was, I don't know why I just like this picture. I always try to find old photographs. This photograph was taken somewhere from the English embankment, but I like it so much. I like the vibe. I like the horses, the winter, the sleigh, and all these very important men uh, rushing somewhere to their offices, or maybe they're going to a big lunch. I don't know. They could just as well be the people from the English embassy. Who knows? So, but I enjoy this picture for the vibe of St. Petersburg. I don't know. And the English embankment originally, the first buildings originated here. Originally originated. Sorry for my language. The first buildings originated here in basically the same time around Peter the Great, so around the establishment of the city. This is the first half of the 18th century, 1700. And as you know, Peter the Great brought a great deal of international workers, foreign workers from all over Europe, and he brought a lot of Englishmen. And they would come with their families, and they needed even their church. So originally there was a very small Anglican chapel, and then there was built a house. It was already the end of the 18th century, and exactly in this house used to be an Anglican church. Now it is a concert hall, and the church is not functioning as the church. This is the photo from the that photo is from the pre-revolutionary times. I can't tell you when exactly it was taken, but that's clearly from the times it was still the church. It stopped functioning as a church after the revolution, but they managed to preserve the interiors, and it was used as a big concert hall, and the entire building is now part of the Philharmonics, the State Philharmonics. Well, I know at least a few years ago there were talks, there were discussions on returning the church to the Anglicans, because there still are some communities in the city, mainly the descendants of those Englishmen that lived in St. Petersburg. But that's basically a few buildings to this side. That's where the Anglican Church is. So there is still a little bit of this English vibe in the embankment, but not definitely not on the same scale as it used to be. Originally, however, the Rumyantsev Palace looked like this, much smaller and much more modest in its decoration, but things changed closer to the turn of the 19th century. Here you see that originally the building originally was of a different, even the dimension was the same, but it was different, and also that there are several rules in the city that were in, I would say, they were quite strict on the colors of the buildings, but that would be mostly the buildings constructed in the second quarter of the 19th century. Let's say some of you asked me a couple of times why so many buildings in the city are of a yellow color. With regards to embankments, with regards to the areas where the construction had already been quite busy, that rule didn't really apply much. It was mostly about the height of the buildings, and you must have noticed that the height is more or less the same. That was one of the rules for sure. Okay, and exactly. So this house used to belong to a prominent Russian family, aristocratic family, very close to the family and the office of Peter the Great. And this house was also used as a house for international guests, such as the Swedish King Gustav IV stayed here together with his uncle. He was going to propose to one of the daughters of the emperor, but it didn't work out. So he left. There was quite of a scandal. So, but it's important to understand that this house was always a very big one, a very beautiful one, very rich one, just to accommodate very high, very honorable guests. And closer to the turn of the 19th century, the palace was purchased by Nikolai Rumyantsev. That's him. I don't expect you to know who he was, but he is quite famous in the country. He is a descendant of a prominent Russian army general. And you can see here the well his awards. That's for the contribution to the development of the country. And Nikolai Rumyantsev is the first and foremost known as the great politician and the diplomat. Here he's wearing the sash of the Andrew First Cold Order. So he also, in earlier years, participated in several military operations. But in a nutshell, he was a politician. He was uh, we could even say he was sort of an agent of the imperial court of Catherine the Great. So end of the 18th century, early 19th century. He managed to, by the way, save his position under three Russian monarchs. So Catherine the Great, Emperor Paul, her son, and then Alexander the First. And he the all the Romanovs trusted him so much that he could even, let's say, pass on very private messages between the monarchs or between, well, from the monarch to elsewhere. And the Romanovs knew that all their secrets and all their affairs would be kept a secret. So they knew that. When he stayed in Europe, and he was a Russian ambassador as well, he was sort of an agent for Catherine the Great for artworks. They trusted his expertise, they trusted his taste on art purchase. He just had to write a message to Catherine the Great saying, Catherine, I've got some nice Rubens here. Would you like some Rubens? And she was said, yeah, sure, please, Count. Uh, get me the Rubens. And he would. That's how awesome he was. And also he himself was an art collector, but mainly books. So books was his biggest passion. And he managed to amass about 28,000 books, different volumes. And when he purchased this house, I remind you that the house looked a little different. It had the same dimensions, but the portico was different. The tympan, I would say just the exterior had to be changed into more like classicistic view. He rebuilt the house. He rebuilt also the house from the inside he because he amassed such a great collection, he decided to change the interiors of his palace into a museum. He left for himself three big rooms. That's where he lived. He also had his study, and then the rest of the palace was given for museum purposes. And thus it became the very first museum in Russia, the very first private museum in Russia. That is we can say early 19th century. And this museum would be open to public. It would be free of charge, and anyone could come. Okay, I'm sure, Dorley, you know that you might get notifications shortly. I just need to tell you this. Sorry, I always have my phone at hand. I just keep following the developments of the situation. Yeah, and what you see here is the decorations on the portico of the palace. This is Apollo Musajet and the Muses. So that's sort of an allegory of Count Rumyantsev, who was a patron of arts. He indeed supported a lot of artists, and well, he amassed a great art collection himself. He didn't have children of his own, which is a bummer because that's eventually, well, okay. let's not go. Let's not put the horse before the wagon. Put the wagon before the horse. So he had his brother though, Sergei Rumyantsev, who also didn't have children. So Sergei Rumyantsev was appointed the in charge of the museum as an administration, as an administrator, and he also registered the items. He kept everything in the logs, all everything cataloged, and this was a thriving museum with a world glory indeed. Some rare manuscripts, and when Nikolai Rumyantsev passed away, so his brother became the only one in charge of the whole museum, and that's the portrait of Sergei Rumyantsev in the palace. And from the window, and you can see the column, right? But from the window, you can see the Neva River and a ship. So, and you see he's also holding a manuscript. That's because in the book collection had several thousands of rare manuscripts from Russian churches, from Russian collections, from European collections. And the ship over there, it's not just a ship. This is a ship that docked by the windows. You saw the postcards. We are just by the embankment of the Neva River. So that ship has just returned from this circumnavigation, and it's filled with different uh, exotic items. And that ship was sponsored solely with the Rumyantsev's money. So, and then it docked by the windows of the palace, and then that significantly enlarged the Rumyantsev collection. The portrait, by the way, was made by the court artist of the Romanovs. That's just so you would understand the scale of these people. George Daw, it was the British artist who was invited to the country by Emperor Alexander I. And I mentioned George Daw a lot when I did tours in the Hermitage Museum. There is a gallery of the heroes of the 1812 battle against Napoleon. So all the portraits in this gallery were painted by George Daw. There's like 100 something of them. I can't even remember. Also, Sergei Rumyantsev. So apart from just like his brother, apart from being a great art collector, and he was also a donor to artists and aspiring people, aspiring artists, so to speak, in the country. He was also a philanthropist. I'm sure, my Ukrainian colleagues spoke a lot about Taras Shevchenko, an artist, a writer, a poet, Ukrainian descent, and he actually was the son of a slave, of a serf, right? So up until 1861, there was serfdom in the country, and Taras Shevchenko, uh, he was a serf. He belonged to an Engelgard family, and he started to show his talent for art very early. And I'm not going into details. I'm sure uh, Olga's either of Olga's must have told you about him. The great artist. I really like his works and also his poems. The thing is that so his by the way, that's his portrait of his master Pablo Engelgard, and he started to show talent for art, and the fame of a serf artist uh, from Ukraine, it reached St. Petersburg. And this is when Sergei Rumyantsev, together with a few other people, including the wife of the emperor, by the way, they decided to buy him from this merchant, from the master, and the average price for a serf would be, I'm sorry, I'm saying such horrible things, but that's how things were back then. So the average price of one serf was about 75, 100 rubles. Engelgard required 2,500 rubles for one Taras Shevchenko. And so there was a big auction uh, where the big painting was sale of an Russian artist, Karl Brulov. By the way, the house of Shevchenko and some of his works. Just saying, thanks to whom Shevchenko was set free. The money were given by two aristocratic families and the Romanovs, and this is how Shevchenko was set free, and he was able to enroll in the Imperial Academy of Fine Arts, and this is how we have one of the greatest Ukrainian artists and poets of the 19th century. That's just thanks to Rumyantsev and a few other people, including the Romanovs. Yeah, so just some of the views of Ukraine. Shevchenko is known as one of the greatest 19th century artists who always, I would say, promoted and kept the Ukrainian heritage. Yeah, so when we are back to the to St. Petersburg, sorry for all these introductions, but this is important. Well, for me, it is important to speak more about Rumyantsev since it's the name of the palace still. However, unfortunately, after Sergei Rumyantsev died, nobody wanted to take care of such a big museum. There wasn't, by the way, before his death, Nikolai Rumyantsev decided to rebuild one section of the palace, and he built their apartments, so they would be rented out, and the money from them and the money from the rent of those apartments would be covering the costs for the maintenance of the museum. But after the death of both Rumyantsevs, it was no longer considered feasible. So they decided, long story short, close the museum and send its collection to Moscow. And now in Moscow, not far from Kremlin, by the way, there is the Pashkov House, which belongs to the big public library. It's still named after Lenin, by the way. And now the great collection of those books can be found in this house. And by the way, that's the apartments from the back of the palace. These are the apartments that were sort of paid the rent of which paid for the maintenance of the museum. Now, so we're getting to the Romanovs, but before we get to the Romanovs who owned this palace, we need to speak about the Grand Duchess Maria Nikolaevna, who was the daughter of Emperor Nicholas I. She, unlike most Russian nobility, she decided to stay in the country. So she was daughter of Nicholas I, so she wanted to stay in the country. And her condition for her marriage was that her husband was supposed to stay with her and live in St. Petersburg. Well, Nicholas was okay with it, very much okay with it. And the husband of Maria Nikolaevna will be Maximilian de Beauharnais. Maximilian de Beauharnais was the grandson of Josephine, Napoleon's first wife. She was married to Alexander Beauharnais, who was, I would say, well, that's an aristocratic family in France. So in a way, it was a sort of, well, it's not really the burying the hatchet with Napoleon. That was not possible, obviously, but it was way after Napoleon. But that marriage and having a last name of Beauharnais, it was still it sounded a little bit too harsh. Maria didn't feel very comfortable being called Countess de Beauharnais, but long story short, it wasn't a very happy marriage. But Maximilian, however, proved to be quite an efficient manager. That's his grandma, wife to Napoleon, and that's Alexander Beauharnais, his father. but they're not exactly related to our story, but their descendants are. However, so it's interesting that Maximilian was in charge of the Academy of Fine Arts. And indeed, during his office, there was a lot of cutting edge technologies that could be applied to art and architecture. So, one of the children was Yevgeny or Eugene the Beauharnais. Maximilianovich is his patronymic name because his father was Maximilian. He was also Duke of Lichtenberg. He was the Grand Duke Romanov, Duke of Lichtenberg. Um, he wasn't exactly the brightest son of the family, and he wasn't exactly a very good military man, but he was a ladies' man. He was a womanizer, and he married. It was his second marriage. We will go into details in the upcoming tours, so I'll just give you kind of some bullet points. He married. It was his first wife died in labor, but the child survived, and the daughter Daria is quite an interesting character. We'll speak about her in the following in the next episode, which is going to be the last one. So, but his second wife was Zinaida Skobeleva. And well, I mean, have a look. This is, by the way, this is the photo from Wikipedia. It was colorized in such an interesting way, I guess, just to underline how gorgeous the jewelry was that she was wearing, and how much money she had. She was not from the Romanovs, but he was from the Romanovs, and she was just from a very distinguished family, military, aristocratic military family, military dynasty, and her uncle was a very distinguished army general in one of the Russian-Turkish wars. So that was a big deal. So she was a woman, let's say, maybe with not much of dowry, but definitely with the fame. And some photos from the 19th century as well around around the house. You can see the same facade, the same portico, the same colonnade. It's all pretty much the same. And mind you, there is a paving here. In the early 19th century. This was it was one of the first streets to actually get the pavement. And that's the courtyard. So the palace might not look very big from the facade, but that's the trick, because all the buildings are actually quite huge in the embankment. They all would have courtyards. They all would have entrance. There would be the main entrance for people from the street, from the embankment, but the entrance for carriages would be from the parallel street, and this would be the entrance. And that's exactly what it looks nowadays as well. So, and they, after the revolution, quite simple. There would be several institutions who would be that will be placed in this house. The apartments that used to be residential apartments, they would be turned into communal apartments. And eventually, in the 1930s, they opened the Museum of History of Leningrad here in this house. After the perestroika, it was decided to name the palace after Count Rumyantsev and his gigantic private museum. That's the entrance. The palace now looks very different from what it looks during the times of Rumyantsev's brothers. The way the palace looks nowadays, that's exactly the times of Zinaida Skobeleva and Yevgeny de Beauharnais, the last, so to speak, royal owners of the palace. And this was, let's put it like that, this was one of the very popular houses among the socialites. Zinaida Skobeleva herself was a big socialite. party animal, and well, you could see she rolled in it basically in the money of the Romanovs. Yes, this is the photo from the times of Skobeleva, and yes, I know there is a bear there. Yes, I know. Yes, that's exactly very stereotypical. That's what you would expect in every Russian house, right? You would expect to see a stuffed bear. What can I say? There's no bear now. Speaking of the mirrors, all the mirrors palace are original, and this is the 19th century mirror that survived the everything. It survived everything. The revolution, the civil war, the Second World War, everything. Obviously, there was a restoration. There was a massive restoration carried out in the palace about 20 years ago. It was a historic restoration, which means they tried to follow all the rules and they tried to restore and preserve everything that was possible to preserve. Well, and that's incredible because even some bigger museums and more, I would say, more popular museums were given much less attention than this one. So I guess that's just because it's a museum. And also well, because it's the Leningrad Museum that also has the siege collection. That could be the reason, because siege is something a very, very important, very sensitive subject. Also, the palace boasts the unique staircase. Altogether, they will build three staircases of this design. If you take a closer look at the photos, by the way, the video is a combination of the video from Oleg. He wasn't able to film much. He was short of time, and I really, well, contacted him, I would say, a few days before that, and I just gave him very few days for the filming. And also, I have some videos and some photos from my camera roll because I went to the palace shortly before my siege tours. So it's kind of a combination of everything. And you can see in the photos that there are no support, there are no any connections, no rivets, no nothing in the staircase. It's just the pieces of marble, the white Carrara marble, obviously the best one. So that's the photo I took from another, just in another mirror in the staircase. That's exactly when I filmed some of the videos. Um, and this is a unique staircase. There's no support. There's no connections. It looks like it's basically hanging in the air. We know, we know that there would be these uh, the marble will be much bigger and it will be built into the walls, but normally there had to be at least some connections here, but there's nothing there. And the two other staircases were destroyed in the bombings of Leningrad during the siege, and this staircase survived, and this is what museum is incredibly proud of. And this is a good place for selfies. I took tons of them, and it was nice to find them on my phone because I thought they are gone, but they're here, and I just shared some of them with you. The sculpture, it's the copy of the original sculpture that used to belong to the Bolgarne family. I told you they were patrons of art. Maria Nikolaevna was a patron of art. So the sculpture originally just it just still it's still around. This sculpture is one of the other residences, and this is just a copy. That's the but the original sculpture that used to be on this spot is now in the Hermitage collection. Look at this, just opulent. So you see the connections. You see that these are just for the carpet, but the way the staircases are, the steps are connected, we don't see them. So that's their unique technology. The sculpture is called Venus taking off a sandal. Yes. Now we're going up. However, there are some rooms and interiors that survived in the first floor or the ground floor, and also on the second floor. And as usual, as every palace would have it, there would be, let's say, the Grand Duke's part and the Grand Duchess's half of the palace. Unfortunately, most rooms in the Grand Duchess's half, especially on the ground floor, well, that's by the way, that's the sculpture, but the original one, and most of the rooms just didn't survive. The rooms from the Grand Duchess. That's because of the different institutions that were given rooms in this palace. Because there was shortage of public spaces, because there was shortage of apartments. That's why all these communal apartments came about. And that's why in one palace there could be seven different organizations from the, I don't know, from a wedding hall to, I don't know, to an undertaker. Well, something like that. I'm exaggerating, but yeah, that's pretty much like it was. Yeah, easily. And this is the also some photos from the internet from the museum website. They, because it's a history museum and because not much furniture survived because of the institutions and everything, so it was decided to sort of recreate the dressing room of a woman of the turn of the century, I mean, turn of the 20th century. And we see here a lot of mirrors. We see here some furniture. We see some dressing tables, some sofas, some portraits of women, some knitting tables, some crafts. Well, that's just basically a collection of a lot of eclectic furniture, and but there's very little memorial items, unfortunately, in the museum. But it's the same period furniture, and the collection. The museum has a rich collection of this period. So it's just some of the best examples of the museum exhibits that are available. And but before that, before this exhibition was arranged here, there used to be a big dressing room of Zinaida Skobeleva, who, as you may have gathered it already by now, had a great jewelry collection and a great number of dresses. And she spent quite a lot of time. I mean, see the just see the photographs. She spent quite a lot of time in her dressing room. And before she got married to Yevgeny or Eugene by the Bogorne, she was the lady in waiting for the empress. And but once she got married, she stopped being a lady in waiting. But who was she? Where was she from? So she was from, as I said, aristocratic family, military. A lot of military people came from this family, distinguished generals and officers, and she obviously rolled in it all the time. She was given the best education. Her mother would take her to Europe every year, and when they lived in Europe, she would even take classes from Pauline Viardot, a singer, an opera singer, one of the best back in the days in the late 19th century. She would take private classes from her. It's like taking private classes from, I don't know, Anna Netrebko or something like that. So she was one of the best singers at that time in Europe. And Zinaida showed quite a good talent and aptitude for singing. And obviously, she was also, she spoke several languages. She was well read, well traveled woman. So eventually, and she also was invited to the famous salon of Pauline Viardot. That's the illustration from Wikipedia of the famous salon of Pauline Viardot. And they, this is also Pauline Viardot. They kept in touch for a long time after that. So she was an educated, talented woman. They met with Yevgeny Bulgarnet at an event, and so by that time he had already been a widow, and it took them several weeks basically to hit it off like a house on fire. And then she was of a lower descent than him because he was the Romanovs. He was the Grand Duke Romanov, and she was just well from the aristocratic family. It was not enough, but because her uncle was a distinguished army general, um, the emperor at that time it was already Nicholas II. He said, "Okay, why not?" And that's how how their marriage was arranged. So they got married and they purchased this house, and that's where they lived. Well, happily for let's say 2 hours, 2 hours, 3 years, not 2 hours, but 2 years. Sorry for that. By the way, this is the photo. You can see the jewelry is the same. This is from the um, there was a big ball in the Winter Palace. You were supposed to come like a masquerade. You were supposed to come in the traditional Russian costumes. It was called the Russian ball. And so that was her outfit. Everyone was photographed, and this is an infinite source. By the way, you may remember, you may know, you might have seen Russian playing cards. So the characters or the Lady of Hearts and everyone, right? So that the characters of the on the cards were inspired by the costumes that the guests on that Russian ball were wearing. And so, as I said, Skobeleva was a socialite. She was always the center of attention. Bright, witty, funny, charming. I don't see it in the photos, but it just my personal opinion. I don't know, obviously. Well, in this photo, she looks really charming, but this is the photo before her marriage. This is the classical outfit of a lady in waiting, just a typical outfit of the lady in waiting. They would have their own pins, some decorations. They would have their kind of a code even. So, anyway, uh, she she was well loved by the Romanovs, by Nicholas II. So she was loved by many, and at some point she became a lover of another Romanov, another Grand Duke Romanov, and they started living together, the three of them. Evgeny Bogarnev, they another Grand Duke Romanov. I'll talk about him more, and Zinaida Skobeleva, and that was part of her bedroom. This photo was taken in 1906. The entire palace was photographed, but not all the photos survived. This photo was taken by the best photographer, Karl Bulla. He was the best photographer, and he was also the most talented photographer who also understood the importance of photography for the future generations. And Karl Bulla photographed a great deal of Russian houses, interiors, views of St. Petersburg, important events in history. He was always there, capturing the moment. And he took photos of the entire house. And it's not like he wanted to have the photos. He was hired, and it was very expensive. But Zinaida Bulgarna knew how well how important um, very popular, very demanded photographer. So at least we have the photographs, we have the interiors, we have the items, and we can understand. And the restorers had the idea of what to restore and how everything should look like. Yeah. So and I will speak more in the upcoming episodes about the nature of their relationships and more about each character that we can talk about. But let's have a look at the interiors, the artworks. The artworks are now in the well. This is the Renaissance period artworks. They are now in the Hermitage collection. And the furniture, unfortunately, we don't know where the furniture is. It must have disappeared when different institutions moved into the palace after the revolution, and then most of them must have been just sold, or they could have ended up in some pawn shops and antique stores, and then in the during the siege times, well, they could have been easily burned just to keep someone warm. This is the photo from the bedroom from a different angle. But we don't have photos of bedrooms themselves because bedrooms were considered something very private and also very utilitarian. So we don't have any of that. Other than that, there are perfume bottles, some underwear, some shirms, some handicraft that every woman would have in those days. That's basically it. And this is the table, a small table to store the handicraft, the knitting, everything. You could mend your clothes there. Everything will be in that table. This is you can see here the small porcelain bottles. Um, this was the boudoir set with creams, with perfumes made in the Imperial Porcelain Factory, and many more beautiful perfume bottles that we see. And so the everyone knew of that love triangle. And so Yevgeny Maximilianovich knew of the relationship. He learned about it quite quickly. Some claim that she even told him herself, and some claim maybe there was just a rumor because their relationships were heavily discussed in the society. It was a big scandal, but they just, I don't know, they just pretended they didn't notice that. But there were all sorts of rumors going around the city, and according to one legend, we don't know whether that's exactly what happened, but some claim that Zinaida brought her lover, the Grand Duke, to Yevgeny Maximilianovich, introduced him, and just told him, "Can he please stay with us?" We don't know whether it's true or not, but what we know about Yevgeny, that he he had money, but because of I would say is that he wasn't very bright, and because they liked expensive jewelry. They like to travel a lot. They just splashed out on this and that. So by the time she found another Grand Duke, he sort of had been a bit in the red and he needed some money. And this happened quite timely. So we didn't know whether he just was so kind to his wife, whether he liked Zinaida so much, or he was just short of funds and he wanted some money. We don't know that. But they lived happily ever after for 10 years, well, before her death. This room, by the way, it's not often opened. It's a small study of Yevgeny Bogornev. And what you see here is, first of all, the furniture. Yes, this gorgeous wooden furniture is original and it survived. And this are leather wallpapers, wall leathers. I don't know even like how to call it, but that's the leather wallpapers that survived, but they were under 3 or 4 coats of Soviet paint. But it survived, was restored. The whole room was restored, but the lamp and the furniture is original. This room, well, you can see the the glossy surface of it, right? So I think from here you see that it's embossed leather. You can see that it's a little bit 3D. Um, yeah, it survived. It's in, I would say it went through several years of restoration, but it's here. It survived. This room is normally only open during the museum night festivals, which is held in many countries of the world, by the way, mostly in May. I think so, sometime in May. And the museum would always be quite creative for the night of museums. I remember visiting this place once, but these are the photos um, uh, uh, from the internet. Okay, so I guess we put it on hold here. So next time I will speak more about their relationships, about Zinaida Skobeleva, about the Romanovs that she was involved with, and we'll see more interiors, some really impressive ones next time. And I think we'll just need just one more tour to deal with everything else. Let me know if you have any questions. And I just would like to remind you that in 30 minutes from now, sharp, I will be doing the White Nights River cruise from St. Petersburg, where we'll be cruising down the Neva River um, during the White Nights under the bridges. And it's just a spectacular thing to do. Absolutely. And in the meantime, I'm sharing all the links here, as well as the links to my website, to my YouTube channel, as well as the links to my PayPal or to buy me a coffee. That's exactly how you can support me. The recording will be available, well, I doubt tomorrow, so I guess Monday or Tuesday. I haven't scheduled the next episode yet, but I will, I promise. And I will be, as usual, sending you the newsletter once a week with the updated schedule. Thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, Dolly, I know. I'm also on alert all the time. So many news, so many notifications, and I know it's very hard to, I found it also difficult to focus on this tour as well. It's not so easy. I know, I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine. Thank you everyone for joining me. Oh, hi Joyce. Sorry, I didn't see you join. Hi everyone. Good to see you. It's always nice to have you on my tours. Even when I'm a little bit I would say absent-minded or just too distracted, it's nice to catch up with you, and it really keeps my mind off things, well, as much as possible in the given circumstances. Thank you for everything. And thank you for your interest in these tours. So next time I'll show you the rest of the interiors, the much bigger ones. And this is such a, I would say, an outbidden spot. I mean, locals know it. I remember I've only brought their tourists. I mean, my international tourists just 2 or 3 times because they wanted to see a communal apartment and they wanted to see the Siege of Leningrad exposition. But we hardly ever really talked much about Rumyantsev, about the interiors. So yes, Dolly. Okay, You need to go and you need to stay in the room, okay? You need to stay in the shelter, please. Get some strawberries. I mean, not the strawberries, some cherries, some peaches. Have some music. Get some Vivaldi with you with a headset. You'll be okay. You'll be okay, dear. Let's continue on St. Petersburg frequency shortly. Indeed. Dolly, I'm thinking of you, okay? And all my friends in Israel and family and everyone. Thank you so much. I'll see you shortly. Bye bye.